This is extremely weird. I hope this is... It better be working. Alright. I guess I'm a YouTuber who holds a microphone now. I don't really know what to do with it. Do I clip it onto my shirt and make my shirt hang weird? You know? Alright. Look at my background. It's so cute. Just kidding, it's not that cute. It's fine. Okay. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Kel Lauren. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a graphic designer, and welcome home. I have a tentative script for this, and I've never used a script before. This is new to me, so bear with me. I am also holding a microphone. I know this is weird, but that's just what YouTubers do now, and if I clip it anywhere else, it looks weird. So I'm not gonna do that. So it's been a while since I've posted. It's been like 2.5 years since I've posted a video, and a lot of things have happened, and I would like to formally tell you that I am finally coming back to YouTube. It's been a long time coming, as Taylor Swift once said, and I'm really excited to share all of this new content with you guys. So it's been a while since you've last heard from me, unless you've been following me on like Instagram and Twitter. So I'd like to fill you in and make up for the time lost. So for this video, I'm going to be breaking it into kind of like 2 main parts, and there are chapters below if you want to skip around. I understand why. But in this video, I'm going to be mentioning a couple topics that might be triggering for some folks, and that includes physical health problems, mental health problems, including suicide ideation, and pet death. So some pretty heavy topics. So if all of that is a little too much to handle, completely understand. You can click off the video now. Won't hurt my feelings. Totally fine, I understand. So I'll try to make this diatribe short, but as you can see, it is not gonna be short. So I wanna start off with kind of like filling in the gaps of where I've kind of just left off, and also where I haven't been super open about certain things that have been going on. So I want to start off with 4 years ago. It's just over 4 years ago as I'm filming this. I'm coming up on 4 years as I'm filming this. Literally 4 years ago, I lost my good full-time job at Live Nation. I worked in the merchandise department. I was hired in-house there 2.5 years prior to that, and unfortunately, my department was eaten by the entire pandemic. And so I was kind of thrust out onto my feet, doing kind of, I guess, like, I became a freelancer by force. There was very little work. Nobody was hiring a full-time graphic designer, so me losing my job obviously really sucked. And I had maybe some intention of becoming a full-time freelancer, but it wasn't something that I was ready for, because I know just like how much work goes into it and how difficult it can be. And I didn't want to do that for a number of years still. So when I lost my job, I kind of gave freelancing a more serious go, and I was still like doing content creation on the side, as you guys have seen. Like, I was still making like YouTube videos and stuff, and for a while, like, my YouTube income sustained me like through when I lost my job. It was sustaining me financially, and it was really kind of like vital for me. And because I made money from YouTube, I didn't qualify for unemployment. So I just kind of dove in headfirst into being a freelancer, being a full-time content creator. And that started with myself and my longtime partner, Maddie. We decided to leave LA and move to Portland. It was the great exodus out of LA. Everybody moved out of LA in the summer of 2020, and we wanted to lower our living expenses. That was like the biggest thing, because it's just so expensive to live in LA, and especially when you don't have a job, it's really expensive. So when we moved here, my freelancing kind of started to pick up a little bit more. I dedicated more time to YouTube and kind of like started to get the ball rolling. So throughout the rest of 2020 through the end of 2021, when I stopped posting, I was just kind of like in this like nose to the grindstone type of thing, where I was just like kind of tunnel vision, working all the time. And the whole time I was posting on YouTube, my freelance stuff really started to pick up. I picked up more agencies that I was a freelancer for, and my workflow really started to like overwhelm my plate. So when I stopped posting on YouTube, it wasn't really I think I need to stop posting on YouTube. It was, I don't have a choice anymore. I have to stop posting on YouTube. And it just kind of happened. It wasn't really like a, this will be my last video for 2.5 years. It was, I didn't know that was gonna be the end. And it was mostly because I didn't know how to manage everything that was going on. I had so many balls in the air with freelancing, and I just had like YouTube on the back burner, and it was starting to burn and catch on fire, and I just had to put the fire out to focus on my freelance stuff. So this is the chapter with pet health stuff. If you don't like that, skip ahead. So in the month that I stopped posting on YouTube in November of 2021, my longtime companion cat, Harry, was diagnosed with heart disease. More specifically, he was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a very common variation, I don't know. It's a very common kind of heart disease. And if you've, kept up with me at all, you've seen me talk about how much this disease has ruined my life. And if you've ever followed me anywhere, you've seen Harry, giant black and white cat, long hair. He's incredible. He's hysterical. I got him in August of 2015 after I was in a car accident, and I had a pretty bad neck injury. And so I got Harry as like a companion because I was in so much pain and I had really limited mobility. So I got him as kind of like my buddy when I was in college, and we bonded instantly, and he's been my ride or die since then. And we've just been through so much together, and he's just like, I can't, I'm not gonna cry in this video. I'm not gonna cry. I'm fine. When we found out this news, it kind of like stopped my world and like kind of started this long chain of events that ended up becoming much more serious problems. I learned a lot about what hypertrophic cardiomyopathy like does to the body and what it can look like in a cat. And I kind of like went a little crazy learning all of this information. And the most common thing that happens with heart disease in cats specifically, because it's quite different, I've learned from like dogs with heart disease and from people with heart disease. And it's really under-researched from what I learned. So the main thing that happens in cats with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is that they risk having a major blood clot in one of their hind arteries. And as a result, they're put on blood thinners or other medications that they can be put on. It's debatable on which you should start when, if you should start certain ones, but we started on the blood thinner, and we were just essentially trying to prevent that blood clot from happening. That's really all you can do. And it's a very volatile disease. It can change in a flash. And we were just hoping that he would never have this major blood clot. It's a top of the list emergency. If it happens, you go straight to the top of the list at an emergency vet office because it's like critical. So learning all of this stuff like really became like an all-consuming thought for me. Every time I left the house, it was like a compulsive thought where every time I left, I would have this fear of like coming home and then Harry would be dead on the floor. Like the window in which you have to, like the clot happens and get them help is literally like 20 minutes. It's a very, very small window. And so if like we were at the store or something, even just like grocery shopping, like it could happen and then we could come home and then he would be dead. And that thought drove me insane. And it kind of like chained me to my house. I wasn't leaving anyway because it was the pandemic. I wasn't leaving, but it became very hard for me to be away from him because I was so afraid of this clot happening or something else, some other aspect of the heart disease to happen. And when I worked all day, every day, he was sitting in a chair next to my desk. At night, he slept on my pillow. We were very close. Every like meal, I had to sit next to him because he wouldn't eat unless I was sitting with him. And every morning we had to do this whole show about getting him to take his medication. It was very difficult. And if you've ever tried to give a cat medication, you get it. And so you really have to come up with creative ways to give any cat medication because every cat is so different. But most cats are difficult with taking medications. So that's what was going on with one part. That's Harry. Next part. So during this whole time, my freelance work had really started to take off and become a little bit more stable. Like I was getting consistent work. And I started getting like what I would consider like my dream clients, including clients that I'm not publicly able to say that I work for. And I made peace with that. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And I kind of started to like develop this like chip on my shoulder that I didn't want to be known. And this is something that's just for me. It's no slight to any other designer. It's just a problem between me and my therapist, and we're working on it. But I had this essentially chip on my shoulder about being a social media designer. I didn't want to be known as someone from the internet who gained like notoriety or my clientele because I have a following. And it's kind of like a mix of this chip and imposter syndrome, is that I was just really afraid that people weren't going to take me seriously if I was somebody who had a large following. And when I was at Live Nation, it did come up quite a bit that I had a following, and I was very aware of being perceived by people who I knew like IRL about the size of my following, and that people like knew me, and like a large amount of people like knew me. So it made me very aware of having that presence in a professional space, like a corporate job. So I was very painfully aware of it. And when I was a freelancer, or like when I became a freelancer, I was very afraid of people either hiring me because of my following just for like the reach, or not hiring me because I'm not being taken as like a serious designer, you know? So with that in mind, I really started to like overfill my plate. Like really every single day I was working for like 12, 14 hours. Balancing all of my client work on top of YouTube became impossible between like my brand deadlines for YouTube for like sponsorships and stuff, and then my regular clientele deadlines. Like those are so short. Sometimes I have a couple hours to work on something. Sometimes I have a couple days to a couple weeks, but most of the time I had like maybe 2 days to do like a ton of work. And so it kind of becomes like you have to drop everything that you're doing to start working. So with all of that, I just didn't have like a healthy grasp on my work. I didn't have like a great relationship with my work. I was kind of avoiding my feelings and this like angst that I had developed with Harry being sick, and not feeling like I'm being taken seriously in the freelance field of my niche corner of the market of merchandise design. I really had that fear of not being taken seriously, so I kind of channeled all of that into my work, and it got to a very unhealthy point. Every opportunity that you get as a freelancer, you kind of have to treat it like it's your last, because it could very well may be your last opportunity, and it forces you to like never be able to say no. And maybe I'll do a video, God forbid, on my experience as a freelancer, but I'm very apprehensive about doing that. But it just becomes very hard to say no, because you need the money and you need like the workflow. So you can't say no, because in my head, if I said no, I could be saying no to future projects because I said no to this one project. Does that make sense? So eventually the first shoe to drop became YouTube, because I just couldn't handle it anymore, and I couldn't come back. Like I thought maybe in a couple months after I stopped posting I could come back, but I just couldn't. Like I was so essentially drowning in my work, my freelance work, and then also this deep well that I had fallen into with Harry's health and my own mental health. It just got really bad. So by the time I stopped posting on YouTube, I had like already gone off the deep end with my depression and started to feel like I was like spinning out of control. Like a lot of people during the pandemic, I picked up a bit of a drinking problem. And if you watch some of my videos towards the end of when I stopped posting, like the end of 2021, I'm having drinks in those videos, and I see it now in hindsight, and that's fine. I'm not going to shame people for wanting to drink in their YouTube videos, but for me, it's a obvious illustration of what a problem that was like developing. But I personally ended up just like picking up a drinking problem, and I come from a family of heavy drinkers, but I have some alcoholics in my family, so alcohol is easy for me to consume, and easy for me to consume to an unhealthy level. And not everybody has that, but some people are genetically predisposed to developing alcoholism easier than others, and I think I am one of those people. I would usually start my work day at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then work until like 5 or 6, and then start drinking, and then work till like midnight, and sometimes like till like 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on whatever my deadline was. And it unfortunately became just like an intrinsic part of my work routine that I needed like 2, 3, 4 cocktails to be able to just like sit down and relax and like be creative, because I was so like tense that I felt that I had this need to drink while I was working. And there were like, in hindsight, there were so many nights where I was just sitting like alone in my office with Harry, and I was just like buzzed, or just drunk flat out. And it's really painful to admit it, but there were so many times where I was just alone and like drunk and working on these like superstars. and it felt really sad that I had all these great opportunities and I felt very ungrateful. You know, I had all these things that were going for me and I felt so shitty about them that I wasn't feeling this great excitement that I wanted to feel. And I used a mix of alcohol and just my work to kind of cover up how I was feeling. You know, with all of this work that was constantly coming into my inbox, it became like a burden because I had so many opportunities that I started to just feel very overwhelmed. And having the unique issue of having too much work is not a problem many freelancers, especially freelance designers, encounter. And so I was very cautious about ever complaining about the amount of work that I had because I genuinely just felt overwhelmed all the time. And I was just drowning and I could never say no. And I just had too much work on my plate, like every single day for weeks and months, just way too much work on my plate. And I would remind myself of how great these opportunities are, that I should feel good about having them. Other people in my life would remind me of who I worked for and I should be grateful for it, but I was just miserable. And on top of that, the other thing that I was constantly worrying about was my cat Harry and him just suddenly dying, but he was sitting next to me the whole time. So I was just kind of like feeling, you know, how could I be so ungrateful for all these things that I'm worrying about when like I have so much right in front of me. So I've long struggled with headaches and migraines, and at this point in time, so it was like, you know, early 2022, my migraines were becoming a weekly terror. I used to get them maybe like once or twice a month, but especially throughout 2021, going into 2022, my migraines were genuinely every single week and they would last for like 3-4 days at a time. So those were like days that I physically could not look at my computer. And there were so many times where I had to look at my computer when my brain felt like it was exploding. So I was having more headache days than non-headache days, and the few days when I didn't have a headache, I was cramming so much work in there that I would just essentially trigger another migraine. So all of this came to a boiling point in February of 2022. I had the worst migraine I'd ever had, and it lasted for 4 days. No amount of like pain relievers, nothing. Whatever cocktail you got, it does not work on me. And on the 4th day of that, I mean, I guess I would say it went more into like 5 days, but 4 days. On the 4th day, I got up to go to the bathroom and I like collapsed. So the left side of my body went completely numb, and I was like sitting on the toilet and I can't even explain the sensation that it felt like. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever felt. I felt like all of the blood had left this one side of my body. I couldn't feel my left arm at all, and I couldn't see, and my hearing had also gone. And so I remember feeling like I was panicking, and the only thing that I could think of was that, am I having a stroke? But that was like the only thing. It was like, something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong. And I have a clotting disorder, and so I know I'm at a much higher risk of developing a blood clot wherever in my body it may be. Could be in my brain. So I ended up going to the hospital because I thought I was having a stroke, and to make sure that if I was having a stroke, I got medical attention. And we were in the emergency room overnight, and they did all sorts of scans, and thankfully all of my scans came out clean, but it doesn't explain the episode that I had. So I learned that I have something called hemiplegic migraine, which is a rare kind of migraine disorder where it essentially, they're like migraines, but it feels like you're kind of having a stroke. It's unusual, it's rare, and it's something that I have. So that's fun. So this was kind of like my first of many wake-up calls. I had pushed my body beyond its limitations, and I had it fighting me every single day. I had just gotten full health insurance a couple months prior to that, so I decided that I need to actually address some of the health issues that I had been putting off for so long. Main one being my migraines. And so after my episode, I started migraine treatment more seriously. Like, I upped my dose that I was on, that I wasn't, properly taking. Started a daily medication, and this daily medication did not mix with alcohol at all. So I had to wait months for this medication to start working, because it's not an instant thing. It's a daily thing. You have to wait like 2 months for it to start working. So I'm going through that, building up the time in that to get it built up in my body for it to work. And then simultaneously, I'm having to quit drinking, which was difficult. And when I tried to stop drinking, I realized that's how bad it had gotten, because it became very hard for me to not drink every day. After about like 2 months, my migraines were occurring less and less, and I had stopped drinking for the most part. I won't lie and say that I quit and I'm sober entirely. But it was for the first time in years that my migraines had like subsided for quite a bit. In May of 2022, I was diagnosed with ADHD, finally. Both my younger sister and my older sister have been long time diagnosed with ADHD. Their diagnoses are not recent. And they told me that I need to go get assessed. And so I was like, okay. And I did, and my psychiatrist said, yes, absolutely. Especially if both of my sisters have long been diagnosed. Yeah, I'm gonna have it. It is genetic. So, learning more about ADHD and learning what it looks like in me gave me a lot of closure on the way that I am. I started to work earlier in the day, which definitely like helped move my workload up to a more reasonable time frame. And I tried out a couple different medications, and I landed on 20 milligrams of extended release methylphenidate, or Ritalin. Love her, love Miss Ritalin, she's great. And because of that, I started meeting my deadlines before they happened. It was great. I was actually able to start working without the need of alcohol, and I could actually start working at a reasonable time in the day. My life was still far from together. Like, I was in such a state of emergency. For me to come back, it like to YouTube specifically still felt like the most daunting thing. Like, so many things were still on fire in my life, and I had just put one little fire out, but I still had like 17 other fires. And I didn't feel like I was ready to go back to YouTube. I like the thought like genuinely stressed me out so much. And I felt like I hadn't proven to myself this little silly worm in my brain that I wasn't good enough as a freelancer. And so between that and just like the revolting feeling that I felt every time I thought about posting on YouTube, like I couldn't do it at all, plain and simple. The rest of 2022, I spent just readjusting my work-life balance. I was just trying to reestablish a better relationship with my work, and that was quite difficult. But having, the proper medications for managing my migraines and managing my ADHD, between those two, I was able to just like start to catch up to the ball that I had been chasing. The ball had rolled far away from me, but I was starting to catch up to it. So, this is the sad part. This is another sad part. Boo, sad part. So on February 9th, 2023, my nightmare that I had been avoiding for so long happened. Harry had a blood clot and he died. So, I'll spare you the details, but it was truly horrifying. Would not recommend that whatsoever. We gave him the best support that money could buy. I dug myself into a lot of debt because of it, but I wanted to give him the best shot that I could. But unfortunately, his body had other plans beyond what I could buy for him. So we said goodbye to Harry on February 11th at 1:15 in the afternoon of 2023. And it was probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make. And I'm still, to this day, working through the guilt of those 2 days that he spent on life support. And the experience of grieving Harry has been something that I can't even describe, and that he left just like a crater in my brain. So to help cope with that, we decided to move. We were sitting at home, and it was like he was almost like haunting us, that we expected to see him everywhere we looked, and he wasn't there. And it was, I'm not gonna cry. It was really hard, and I do not grieve well. I've already had to deal with a lot of death in my life prior to losing Harry, and I know myself, and I do not handle death well at all. So we moved, and we were able to get a much bigger space where Maddie and I can have our own offices, and, just more room for us to just kind of spread out, because our old apartment was fairly small. Even though we did have another bedroom for our office, the overall square footage of the apartment was still fairly small. And I also hated living there. I hated it so much. We were on such a loud road, and it drove me crazy. Yeah. So the rest of that year, I spent just buried deep in my freelance work, trying to avoid the feeling of grief. I couldn't handle it. I could not I literally couldn't process it at all. And randomly during that entire time, I would just feel like I got like hit by this big wave of grief, and I would just burst into like weeping tears. And it was something that happened like every day for months. And Maddie and I were really great with one another. We really relied on one another during that time. And I mean, we still do. But like, it was really hard. And both of us had to deal with processing these feelings of just intense grief that only we knew. It was all not like a family member, not a friend. It was someone that Maddie and I had essentially raised together, and it felt like a very devastating loss. So all that being said, and this is another sad part, this whole video is just fucking sad. It's funny now. That's why I'm allowed to laugh about it. You guys can't laugh. Or maybe you can, I don't care. So the past year, it now being April 2024, from February 2023 to essentially January of 2024 was the most difficult year of my life. I started this script, my comeback video, I started this script in October of 2023, which is kind of crazy because at that point I was the most depressed I had ever been. I can't even explain how bad it was, but every day I woke up and I was genuinely terrified of myself. I felt so guilty and shameful about everything that happened, and I kept replaying what happened with Harry just over and over again, and I would have these horrible nightmares about it, and I just had such intense like graphic imagery constantly playing in my head, and I just felt that I didn't deserve a lot of the things that I had in my life. I felt, and I still do, feel like a massive failure. And that's just the thing that I feel all the time. I feel all sorts of guilt and shame and failure. Those are my big feelings that I have. And to be honest, like, I didn't want to live anymore. I thought that all of this was just, it was becoming too much for me to handle. And everything about my life just felt like I was drowning. Every aspect, I was just drowning in over my head, and I didn't feel like a person anymore. And it's just like so many things were just failing. I felt like I was losing clients. I was like not getting hired as much anymore, and I really started to internalize that. And I just wasn't taking good care of myself. I wasn't taking good care of my work. I wasn't producing work that I was happy with. And I just feel like a shame of things, and that's just the tying thread of so many things in my life is shame. Everything I do, I feel bad about. Even if it's like a good thing, I still feel shameful about it. And it's like a crushing feeling that like seeps into every facet of your life. Every good thought that I would have would immediately be followed by this like wave of guilt and shame, and that I didn't actually deserve any good thing. I just deserved this hate towards myself. And that feeling of self-hatred is just who I became. And I've been somewhat private about like my mental health, unless you followed me like on social media, but I have been fairly private about it, and it in a way like prevented me from wanting to seek help. Because I just had like this so much shame around that I have to be, you know, my own person. I'm the only person that I can rely on. And I was just really afraid of sharing just how I was feeling, because people would always remind me that I should be grateful for everything that I have. And it didn't feel like it didn't work. It didn't work on me to say that like, oh, well, you have X, Y, and Z, you know, like you have all of these great clients, you have, you know, like people who love and support you. But it's like, to me, it doesn't matter, because I do not like me. I do not like who I am as a person. I don't like anything in my life because it doesn't feel like something that I deserve, and that I already feel like I'm halfway out the door. I just don't care anymore. And so it prevented me from wanting to seek help because I just didn't care. And it's just unfortunate that actually seeking help was like a last-ditch effort for me. And literally at the time when I was started writing this script, I lost my health insurance because I didn't see a letter that came in the mail, and I lost my health insurance for a month. And I remember calling my insurance provider saying, I'm going to kill myself if you do not give me my insurance back. And they were like, sorry, love, you forgot to pay your premium because you were suicidal. You forgot to pay your bills. And so they took my health insurance away. That's really cool. So in a really weird, sick and twisted way, and I don't know if anybody else has felt this way, but it's definitely a very specific feeling that I hope not many people have had to decipher. But I just felt like my guilt was so intense that it was driving me to this like edge of this cliff. But at the same time, my guilt like kept me on the cliff, if that makes sense. So this brings us to today. It's getting dark in here. It is getting dark. That's cool. So that brings us to today. So as I'm recording this, it is Saturday, April 13th, 2024. Right now, I'm working with my psychiatrist and my therapist, who I started seeing end of last year. And we've been working through everything that I had been feeling, and we are still exploring with a couple different medications a possible bipolar disorder diagnosis. I had never thought about having bipolar disorder. It would be bipolar 2. So trying to put essentially these guardrails back up onto my life so we can prevent some of these lows from coming back and preventing me from falling into other unhealthy habits as a way of coping with my depression. I'm still working on implementing healthier habits to help my relationship with my work and just my general work-life balance. And I feel like just for like the first time in a really long time, if not ever, I feel like I have actual control over my life. And the thing is about just now logging online and getting that control over your life at the age of 28, the shitty thing about that is that like there are so many things that have already fallen apart that I now have to go back and mend. And nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about having to go back and pave over all the potholes that you made while getting here. So that's where I'm at now. I'm trying to fix those potholes, reestablish my connection with myself, with people around me, and ultimately like what I love doing, which is graphic design. It's so silly, but I love it so much. And I want to continue to build on that relationship that I found with design literally a decade ago that I've been doing design. So I'm hoping with my comeback to YouTube and my whole plan for everything, my schemes, that essentially I have more people to hold me accountable for what my goals are. And my goal is really just stability. I want to be healthy mentally and physically. I want to just be who I want to be. And that sounds really like small and menial, but like it's what I've lost. It's everything that I didn't have for the past 2 years, but especially for the past 4 years. I lost so much and I want to try to put things back together because that's really all I want. So part of my healing journey, if you will, is reconnecting with my audience, because throughout all of this, like people who follow me either on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, for whatever reason that you guys follow me, people have been so kind and supportive of me. Like it's so heartwarming, and I don't know, newsflash, people care about you. And like I can't begin to thank people enough for how much support that they've given me when I haven't been able to return the favor and support the people in my following. It means just so much that I have touched people in a way that they feel that they can share information with me and support me when I'm not giving people the content that I used to be able to give them. And yet people still hung around. And the people who hung around really helped me through a lot of this bullshit that I went through, because I just felt so alone, and when things got really bad, I completely retreated. I love making videos. I love graphic designing, and I love talking to other people who feel the same passion that I do. So even though I haven't posted on YouTube in over 2 years, my community has still shown up for me. And because that is so monumental in the long run of how much it meant to me, I need to return that favor. I need to start showing up for my community again. I'm getting some vocal fry because I've been talking for so long. So it's time I return the favor to you guys and to show you the love, show myself the love, because I really believe that we deserve good things. Maddie and I have, and it's just Maddie and I still. I don't have a manager yet, considering it. And it's just the two of us making these silly, goofy videos. So together we have crafted a strategy on how we can manage my content. So it's adaptive to my freelance schedule. So it'll be fairly different from my old content, but it'll still be design related. And I think you guys will like it, but it'll be different more so on my end of how we construct things. And honestly, I'm really excited about it because it feels like a fresh air. It feels like fresh air to me. I spent so long not being able to breathe and keep my head above water that this new strategy and approach that we are taking feels so revitalizing without sounding like I'm in a cult or something. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys, and I hope you stick around. If you don't, that's okay. I will not take it personally. So now that I've rambled for literally so long, I'm currently sitting at an hour of recording time. That's fun. Look at my new camera. I hope it's okay. It's definitely getting dark. Oh well, I'm figuring it out. It's fine. That's all. Thank you so much for welcoming me back to YouTube, re-emerging back into my community. And I am so excited, and I really appreciate you for sticking around. I'm excited to see where this journey takes us. So, is there anything else I wanted to mention? Ooh, I will say something. In January of this year, we adopted Benson. Here's Benson. He is almost a year and a half old now. We adopted him from the Oregon Humane Society. He has feline idiopathic cystitis, which is a bladder condition, essentially where his bladder and urethra don't quite work correctly. And sometimes he has a really hard time peeing. It can be a very dangerous health condition. He has had a history of full urinary blockages. That's why he was surrendered to the Humane Society twice. And so we adopted him, and we have also since learned, since adopting him, that he is deaf. We didn't know he was deaf when we adopted him, but he is absolutely deaf. So he's a really funny, really sweet guy. He has so much goddamn energy, but he gets along really well with our other two cats. They adore him. They play all the time, and you will be seeing him around. We call him Benny, like Benny and the Jets. He came with the name Benson, and he just looks like a cat named Benson, so he's gotta keep the name. But he's hysterical. You will hear him probably in the back of my videos because he screams so loud, because he can't hear himself. So he's fantastic, great little guy. You will see him around. Sound off in the comments if you also have a cat with FIC. It's a fairly common condition, actually. So Benny is in his Zen era. We have to keep him very calm, keep his house as calm and stress-free as possible, which means proper engagement. For me, I need proper engagement, and I need moments where I can rest for long periods of time and be able to relax and recharge. So that's the last thing I'll blab on about. Okay, thank you so much for watching this long diatribe about my sorrows, the pits of Kelly. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one, and I would like to thank you for coming home. Bye. Goodbye.